Hey guys, in this video I'll be going over every Mr. Olympia champion and highlighting their best mandatory pose. I'll be focusing on factors like wow factor, how well the pose showcased their standout attributes, whether that's size, shape separation, or structure, and how effectively it emphasized what made them great. This sort of builds off my previous video on each Mr. Olympia's biggest strength, since their best pose usually goes hand in hand with what made them special in the first place. Now, before we do dive into it, if you guys are interested in high-quality old-school lab supplements, you can use my code JakeUltimate or check out the link in the description down below. With that all being said, if you do enjoy these videos, a like and sub would be awesome. And without any further ado, let's get into this video. Let's kick things off with the very first Mr. Olympia, Larry Scott. Now, when it comes to Larry, there's no debate about what made him stand out the most. His arms were easily the best of his time. His biceps had insane length and fullness, his triceps were thick and well developed, and even his forearms had that thick, dense look that completed the entire physique. In an era where bodybuilding hadn't yet truly established itself, Larry set that standard for total arm development. That being said, he did not have the most ideal structure. His clavicles were not the widest, his waist was not particularly small, and overall his shape lacked that dramatic taper that you see in more genetically gifted competitors. Because of that, he naturally leaned towards more arm-dominant poses, the ones that brought all the attention to his best body parts. And in my mind, the pose that defined Larry Scott was the front double. It showcased his freaky biceps from the front, gave him a commanding silhouette, and some artistic posing tweaks minimized any structural weaknesses. This was really the pose that set him apart, as nobody could match him in the first out-the-gate pose, and that's where he would dominate the lineups. Next up is Sergio Oliva, the Myth. Sergio had one of the most eye-catching physiques of his time, and maybe of all time. He had a ridiculously small waist, flaring lats that seemed to stretch forever, massive arms, and huge legs for the time. All of that combined to give him one of the most impressive V-tapers that we have ever seen. Now, from the side, he was definitely not the thickest of all time, especially in the lower body, which was pretty common for that era, and from behind, while he did have that width in the lats, the detail and density in the lower body were obviously not quite at the level of future competitors. That said, when he turned to the front and hit that front double pose, everything really clicked. His arms were nearly, if not more, impressive than Larry Scott's, but on top of that, he had way more size everywhere else. His lats flared, his waist was tight, his quads were popping. It was a complete and unforgettable look. And while I personally love his iconic non-mandatory victory pose with the arms overhead, a real statement of dominance when he was on, if we are sticking to the mandatories here, which we are, the front double biceps is without a shadow of a doubt Sergio Oliva's greatest pose. Now we've got the one and only Arnold Schwarzenegger, and picking his best pose is actually debatable. He had some clear standout features, world-class biceps, arguably the best chest of all time, and a physique that just screamed golden era. He also brought one of the first widely recognized Christmas tree lower backs, with impressive detail in the back poses that often gets overlooked today. That said, he was not without his flaws. His waist was on the wider side, his legs, particularly the quads, were never his strong suit, and his shoulders were not quite as dominant as his arms or chest. But somehow, all of that added to his charm. That said, there are three poses in particular that really stand out to me. First, and obviously, the side chest. This one is very iconic. It showcases his insanely thick chest, impressive arm density, and has that unforgettable silhouette. His side leg might not have been the best, but it never pulled too much attention anyways. Second, we've got the front double biceps. This is probably the most recognized mandatory pose for him, and it definitely put those legendary biceps front and center. But here, the wide waist and relatively smaller legs becomes more noticeable, even with his clever posing adjustments. Finally, the rear double biceps, an underrated pose for Arnold. His upper back had great shape and detail, and that early Christmas tree was a true standout. But again, the lack of hamstring and glute development in that era takes away from the overall impact, in my own opinion. So, while all three have their merits, I'd actually go with the side chest here. It's not just iconic, it highlights both his best body parts, the chest and arms, while also downplaying his structural weaknesses. A true golden era pose for a true golden era legend. Up next is Franco Columbo, and if there's one word that describes his physique, it's gotta be dense. He built an incredibly thick back, great chest, solid arms, and decent enough legs for his time before his injury before the 1981 Mr. Olympia. His midsection was also pretty tight, and overall he looked like a block of pure muscle. That said, his structure did work against him in some areas. He was shorter, and his limbs were therefore a bit more compact, which made his arms and legs appear a bit stubby and threw off his proportions. He also lacked that commanding presence of some taller competitors. Now, I'm torn between two poses here, the rear double and his most muscular. From behind, his back was incredible, wide, dense, and very detailed. His arms and shoulders looked great in this pose as well, though the legs were just okay. Still, for fans who appreciate old-school muscle, it was one of the best backs during his time. But then there's the most muscular. Even though it was not a mandatory during his competitive days, Franco hit it pretty often, and it was extremely freaky. The deep chest splits, the insane density, and the way it masked any of his structural flaws made it a standout pose. He looked like a compact wrecking ball. Between the two, I would probably go with that most muscular. It showcased everything he was great at and made you forget about the rest. That said, let me know in the comments down below which pose you thought was his best. Now we come to Frank Zane, the ultimate aesthetic champion. Zane's physique never had overwhelming size, but he did have balance, proportions, and flow. He brought just enough muscle to look complete, but his real strengths were his symmetry, razor-sharp condition, and of course that legendary vacuum. He was a master poser and often hit a wide range of elegant classic shots, but when it comes to the mandatories, one pose clearly stands out. The ab and thigh, especially with his full vacuum, was where Zane truly separated himself from the competition. It showcased everything that made him great. His tiny waist, sharp midsection, clean lines, and that insane control over his body. His condition from the front was always on point, and this pose just emphasized everything he stood for. Yes, he lacked size compared to other champions, but this pose turned that into a non-issue. It highlighted his strengths and downplayed the rest. So for Zane, the ab and thigh, especially with the vacuum, has to be his signature pose. A perfect blend of aesthetics, detail, and dominance. Next, we have Chris Dickerson, one of the most underrated and often overlooked Mr. Olympia winners, and a true jack of all trades. He was never the biggest nor the most aesthetic, and his structure was fairly average. But what made him stand out was his consistency, condition, and balance. He rarely looked off, and while he did not have any jaw-dropping features, he also had no glaring weaknesses, except maybe the arms, which were clearly behind the rest of his physique. That said, his legs were a real strong point, with well-developed quads and standout calves for the time, and his back, while not massive, still had solid development and detail. After spending some time really looking into his poses over the years, one pose keeps standing out to me, the front lat spread. It highlights his best features, the quads, the width of the lats, and the clean presentation, while drawing any attention away from the weaker arms. It's a pose that brought everything together and showcased his physique in the best light. For someone known for balance and detail, the front lat spread fits perfectly as his signature pose. Next up is the 1983 Mr. Olympia, Samir Bannout. Samir was one of the most well-rounded champions that we have ever seen, a bodybuilder who combined shape, balance, and detail when he was on. His biggest struggle throughout his entire career was definitely condition, but when he nailed it, he looked like a true unbeatable champion, and he did exactly that at his one and only Mr. Olympia win. He had no weaknesses, and nothing looked overdeveloped or out of place. While he is best known for his insane back, one of the greatest of all time, Samir had other underrated strengths as well. His arms were big, full, and deeply separated. His midsection was tight and detailed with great control. And his quads and calves, while not super freaky, showed strong development and solid condition. All of that makes his rear double biceps an easy pick for his best pose. It showcased everything he was known for: the width, density, detail in his back, full arms, and well-shaped legs, all tied together with symmetry and flow. It is not only his most iconic pose, but also one that truly captured the essence of his physique. Moving on to Lee Haney, the 8-time Mr. Olympia and one of the most dominant champions the sport has ever seen. Haney's reign during the 1980s ushered in a new ideal, one that combined a genetically superb structure and perfect ratios of condition and muscle. He had that incredible structure, broad clavicles, a tight waist, full legs, and a chest and back combo that was nearly unmatched. His physique was classic yet modern, with size, balance, and proportion. That said, Haney did have a slight weakness in the arms. They were not bad by any means, but compared to the rest of his physique, they lacked a bit of wow factor. Still, they flowed well with his overall look, and never threw off his symmetry. His back, on the other hand, was a powerhouse, incredibly wide, dense, and very detailed, and honestly underrated when people talk about the all-time great backs. As for his best pose, I guess I would go with a front double biceps as a more conservative option. Even though his arms were not freaky huge, the way the pose brought out his wide shoulders, narrow waist, flaring lats, and clean sucked-in midsection made it a true standout in my opinion. It was a perfect balance of classic shape and modern size, and really captured Haney's physique in the best light. Now we've got Dorian Yates, the Shadow, and let's just get this out of the way. His best pose was obviously the front double biceps, specifically in 1997. Alright guys, I'm just joking, but that pose actually showcases exactly what his weaknesses were: weak arms, blockier waist, and a front shot that never did him any justice. In all seriousness, picking Dorian's best pose is rather tricky because he had some absolute killers. The side triceps is a underrated shot, and he hit it with great precision. He'd press the leg into the side to bring out grainy detail, flex the triceps perfectly, and made the whole shot look dense and complete with a trailing massive calf. But over time his waist thickened, and his arms lost a lot of that pop and mass, which hurt the pose later in his career. Then there's the front lat spread, one of the best of all time. It gave him that unstoppable look from the front: wide lats, wide structure, and cut quads. That said, similar to the side tricep, the waist got wider over time, and the bloat and the width did not look that good. And then of course you cannot forget his back poses. Both the rear double and rear lat spread were extremely dominant. But if I had to choose just one, it would be the rear lat spread. The width of the lats was just unreal, flaring out like wings, and combine that with shredded hamstrings, grainy glutes, and some of the best calves of all time, and you get a pose that screamed dominance. It hid his weaker arms, emphasized all of his strengths, and it was from the back where Dorian won nearly every show he entered. Now we get to Ronnie Coleman, and honestly, where do you even begin? At his best, nearly every pose was world-class. But let's get the weaker ones out of the way. His side triceps and ab and thigh were never truly horrendous, but they did not showcase his freak factor the same way any of the other poses did, mainly because of the waist, which was really the only weakness Ronnie had, and in the side tricep, his tricep flattened out like a pancake. That leaves 6 poses, and honestly, you can make a case for any of them being his all-time best. The front double biceps, unreal arms, wide lats, and flared quads that created a cartoonish silhouette. The front lat spread, freaky width, massive and full strided chest, inhuman lats and arms, those massive legs, and that commanding look that only Ronnie could pull off. The side chest, pure thickness from the chest to the arm, the leg, it was all like a wall of pure muscle. Then we flip to the back, the rear lat spread, basically the textbook example, dense, wide, detailed, and topped off with the best glutes and hamstrings that the sport has ever seen. The rear double, that one really had everything. Towering traps, huge arms, shredded glutes, hams, the delts, everything looked carved out of stone. And finally, the most muscular, just Ronnie being Ronnie, bursting with mass, veins everywhere, detail everywhere, and of course, all the just crazy muscle and freaky fullness just everywhere, like I said. I can't even put it into words. But if I had to pick one and only one pose, I think it's got to be the rear double. It hid any of those gut issues even later into his career, maximized his freak factor, and showcased nearly everything that he had, from the back to the arms to the legs. It was so complete, overwhelming, and the kind of shot that left no doubt about who was winning the entire show. Now we've got Jay Cutler, the workhorse of the 2000s. Jay brought incredible size, fullness, and structure to the stage, but when it came to the mandatories, he was not always the most complete. During his career, he struggled with detail in certain areas, particularly in the glutes and hamstrings, and sometimes in the side leg overall. That's especially interesting considering his quads from the front were some of the best of all time, thick, separated, and intricately striated. Later in his career, though, his back started to decline as well, so I would rule out any of the rear poses at his best. From the front, his wide waist could hurt him if his condition was not spot on, and his arms, especially in the later years, showed noticeable asymmetries. But if there's one pose that Jay consistently nailed year after year after year, it's gotta be the side tricep. In this shot, his waist looked incredibly tight, his abs were clean and very detailed, and the arm, delt, and chest all popped. His side leg looked massive, maybe not the most detailed ever, but it added to the overwhelming size in the pose. It was one of the few shots where everything worked in his favor completely. While the most muscular might deserve an honorable mention, and for a non-mandatory pose, the quad stomp, obviously, in both of those poses, he always looked freaky due to the size, and obviously those quads and everything just popped. But in my opinion, the side tricep has got to be his best pose, because Jay always looked great. He was consistent, powerful, and well-balanced, and for me, like I said, it is his best pose. Next up is Dexter Jackson, the definition of consistency, conditioning, and aesthetics. At his peak, he had one of the best midsections in the sport, razor-sharp detail, and well-balanced proportions. But as his career went on, some of those strengths began to fade. His midsection started to lose its tightness, and his arms, once a strong point, developed an imbalance with one noticeably smaller than the other. That makes poses emphasizing the arms or abs less ideal in my own opinion, even if they were once highlights. From the side, Dexter always looked very polished, detailed side legs, sharp triceps, and crisp lines, but he was never the biggest guy on stage, so he did not dominate those poses outright. From the back, he had excellent condition and shape, but lacked the overwhelming size in the lower body and the back thickness to compete with the mass monsters. But one pose where he always looked insane, even into his later years, was the crab most muscular. In this shot, everything came to life. His freaky traps, detailed chest, popping delts, and very full arms all looked exaggerated. It also helped minimize the asymmetry and any midsection issues. For Dexter, the crab most muscular was the pose where all his strengths really came together, sharp, freaky, and impossible to ignore. Now we have Phil Heath, a 7-time Mr. Olympia and arguably the most genetically gifted bodybuilder of all time. Phil's physique was all about roundness, fullness, and that 3D look. His muscle bellies popped from every angle, especially in poses like the side chest and most muscular. He had massive arms, full delts, insane back detail, and great leg separation. When it came to muscular development, he was nearly untouchable. But as his reign went on, one issue that became harder and harder to ignore was the midsection. Early on, it was tight and well controlled, but later in his career, it began to blur and expand, especially in poses that require a tight core, like the most muscular side chest or ab and thigh. Despite that, those poses still looked incredible, minus the ab and thigh, due to his freaky muscularity. However, the one pose that only got better over time and completely avoided the midsection problem was the rear double bicep. This pose was pure dominance. His traps, lats, rear delts, lower back, all of these things exploded with detail and thickness. His arms were peaked perfectly and strided everywhere, and his glutes and hamstrings and calves were always shredded and well developed. An honorable mention here could go to the rear lat spread, but against others he would look weaker due to his narrower structure, and it took his insane arms and delts out of the conversation. This pose, the rear double, is definitely the most complete pose for Phil, and one that defined his entire reign. The rear double was definitely his best, and maybe the best of all time. Next up is Shawn Rhoden, maybe the most aesthetic Mr. Olympia champion of the modern era. His strengths were obvious: a tiny waist with razor-sharp abs, beautifully shaped and feathered quads, and an overall structure that screamed symmetry and flow. His physique had that classic look with a modern level of size and condition, which made him stand out in a lineup full of mass monsters. But he did have some clear weaknesses as well. His arms, especially the triceps, were underwhelming compared to the rest of his physique. His back lacked depth and density that was seen in many of his competitors during the day, and from the side he never looked particularly thick or dominating. So what pose puts all of his best features front and center while minimizing his weaknesses? The ab and thigh, without any question. It showcased his incredible midsection, flaring quads, and that beautiful X-frame, while keeping all the things that were holding him back out of view. It was a shot that perfectly captured what made Shawn special: clean, classic, and very aesthetic. In my opinion, the ab and thigh was truly that ideal pose. Now, I would give an honorable mention to the front lat spread, as it shares similar characteristics to the ab and thigh. But that pose brought the arms into the spotlight, whereas the ab and thigh truly hid any weaknesses, in my opinion. Then again, let me know your thoughts down below. Moving on to Brandon Curry, who brought one of the most aesthetic upper bodies to the Mr. Olympia champion table. He was known for his round muscle bellies, flowing lines, and a super full chest, delts, and arms. From the waist up, he was incredibly complete, wide, thick, and very aesthetic. But his legs were always a weakness, especially from the front and back. His quads either lacked separation or size, and his hamstrings and glutes never quite matched the rest of his physique. Because of that, a lot of the standard front and rear poses, like the front double or rear double, don't really do him any favors here, even though they were great. The most muscular, especially the crab variation, made a strong case since it showcased his freaky upper body, but even then, it really didn't hide the lower body imbalance. In my opinion, his best pose was the side chest. From the side, his legs were actually rather solid, and everything else was a highlight. The full chest, round delts, thick arms, and clean midsection, everything looked really good. This is a pose that he always hit well, and it flowed naturally with his physique. The side triceps deserves a mention as well, as it shares a lot of similarities, but the side chest just looked more dominant and complete, making it, for me, Brandon's best pose. Now we've got Big Ramy, one of the freakiest mass monsters to ever win the Mr. Olympia. Ramy's physique was defined by size. The biggest quads we've ever seen on a Mr. Olympia champion, massive arms, flaring lats, a thick upper body that could overwhelm just about anyone, and pure mass everywhere. But with that came some inconsistencies. Throughout his career, he struggled with detail, especially in the quads, glutes, and hamstrings, and as his Olympia reign went on, his back began to atrophy, which takes the rear poses off the table. Frontal poses like the front double and front lat spread showcased just how freaky he truly was. The front double had an insane X-frame, with wide lats, huge quads, and massive arms. And that front lat spread, easily one of the most overpowering of all time. Only Ronnie in 2003 could rival that level of width and density. You might think his most muscular would be his go-to, but without sharp detail, it often looked more like a wall of mass than a polished pose. In my opinion, I think his best pose has got to be the side chest. He had one of the best chests of all time, his side leg always looked detailed and very full, and the pose maximized all of his strong points, the mass, the thickness, and the roundness, while hiding the lack of definition from behind. He looked very dominant here, and some even argue it was one of the best side chest shots of all time. The front lat spread is a close second, but in my opinion, the side chest really takes it all. Moving on to Hadi Choopan, one of the most conditioned and complete bodybuilders of the modern era from the front. His strengths are clear: a tight, well-controlled midsection, deeply cut abs, insane serratus and intercostals, a lot of width in the clavicles, and thick, massive quads. His condition is second to none, especially frontally, and it makes poses like the ab and thigh and most muscular truly pop. His weaknesses are more apparent from behind. His lower body lacks deep separation and detail, in the glutes and hamstrings particularly, and his back, while decent in shape and mass, does lack a lot of that thickness and separation seen in other champions and competitors today. His arms have also been criticized for shape inconsistencies, if you know what I mean, but they still do look impressive when posed right. The ab and thigh is definitely a strong contender for his best. It showcases the midsection detail and great leg development. But personally, I would go with the hands together most muscular. In that pose, his chest striations are absolutely wild, something that gets lost in the ab and thigh, and his delts and arms still look very dense and powerful. Despite any debate about any, sight enhancements, he brings a freak factor in this shot that sets him apart. For me, the hands together most muscular has got to be Hadi's most complete and dominant pose. Like I said, it truly brings that added freak factor while maintaining all the strong points that Hadi is known for. Up next is Derek Lunsford, one of the best structured physiques in modern bodybuilding. He combines impressive width for his height with a small waist and a great X-frame, making poses like the front double look explosive. But he does have some clear weaknesses. His abs lack deep separation, and he has struggled with midsection control in poses like the side tricep and the side chest. His arms, while big, often lack detail and peak, giving them a smooth, sort of inflated look. His chest was once a pretty big weakness, especially in the upper portion, but it has improved a lot, most notably at the 2025 Arnold, where his side chest pose looked phenomenal and arguably his best non-back pose to date. That said, Derek does his real damage from behind. The rear lat spread is pretty solid, but not unbeatable. He's not the widest, and the detail can fade. The rear double, however, is a different story. His traps, lats, and delts are all thick and shredded, his arms look freaky from behind, and his glutes are among the best on stage today. While his hamstrings, calves, and outer sweep could be sharper, the rear double is by far, hands down, his most complete and dominant pose. Closing things out with Samson Dauda, a modern-day mass monster with a classic twist. Samson's strengths are pretty clear. His structure is phenomenal with wide clavicles, a tight waist, and long limbs that give him that perfect X-frame. He brings a lot of mass, especially in the chest, quads, and arms, and ties it all together with a surprisingly strong set of aesthetics for his massive size. From the front, he's also one of the most impressive in the game. But there are some weak points. His condition from behind has often held him back, glutes and hamstrings tend to lack deep separation, and the back itself, while pretty big and much improved, can fade in detail against more conditioned rivals. His arms are massive, but they lack that sharp separation, and his lats, particularly in width and flare from the front, could still be more dominant in certain poses. For me, it comes down to two poses in my opinion when it comes to Samson's best: the side chest and the front double. The side chest is wild, freaky size, deep separation in the side leg, a massive round chest, and great stage presence. But I think the front double is his signature pose. It showcases the incredible structure, the flaring quads, full arms, a tight, vacuumed waist, and impressive detail from the front. He's almost like a modern-day Lee Haney, and Lee Haney's best pose, in my opinion, was that front double, so it's only fitting here. In my opinion, this pose really hides his weaknesses and highlights everything that makes Samson so special, which is why I would pick it as his best pose. Well guys, that about does it for this video. Let me know in the comments down below if you agree with the poses or not, and why. With that all being said, let me know down below anything else, and I hope you guys enjoyed this one, and I'll see you all in the next one. Thanks for watching.